The billionaire's name was Ethan Hale, a man who owned half the skyline that now loomed above them. He had just left a charity gala, the kind where people wore pearls to talk about helping the poor, only to forget them by dessert. His driver hesitated. "So, should we go around?" But Ethan didn't answer. The girl, Ava, was hitting her brother's chest again and again, tears mixing with the rain. "Please, wake up. Don't leave me." Ethan opened the door and stepped out, rain soaking his crisp white shirt. Ava looked up, startled. "You, please, call an ambulance. He's not breathing." Ethan knelt beside her without a word. His movements were calm, practice. He tilted the boy's chin, checked his pulse. "Is faint but alive," Ethan muttered, pressing 2 fingers to Liam's neck. "We need to keep him warm. Take off your jacket." Ava's lips quivered. I don't have one." Without hesitation, Ethan shrugged off his expensive coat and wrapped it around the boy. The fabric was drenched instantly, but he didn't seem to care. "Hold him. Keep pressure here," he guided, showing her where to press. The ambulance siren pierced the storm a few minutes later, blue lights dancing across wet glass. As the paramedics lifted Liam onto a stretcher, one of them looked at Ethan with recognition. "Mr. Hale? Thank you, sir." Ethan nodded briefly. Ava clutched her brother's hand as they were loaded into the ambulance. She turned to Ethan, her eyes wide and raw. "Please, come with us." He hesitated for a second. Meetings, schedules, obligations flickered through his mind. But something inside him refused to leave. "I'll follow you," he said quietly. The ambulance sped away, siren wailing. Ethan followed in his car, watching the flashing lights ahead. He didn't know why. Maybe guilt, maybe instinct. All he knew was that he couldn't drive away. At the hospital, the air smelled of antiseptic and fear. Ava sat alone on a cold bench, arms wrapped around herself. Her hair clung to her face, soaked and trembling. Ethan approached slowly. "They are stabilizing him," a nurse said softly. "But he'll need oxygen support for a while." Ava looked up at Ethan, eyes filled with exhaustion and disbelief. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stopped." Ethan nodded, unsure what to say. He wasn't used to gratitude, not real gratitude, the kind that came from desperation. Moments later, a doctor approached. The boy had a severe asthma attack. Lack of inhaler made it worse. "He's lucky you acted fast, sir." Ethan exhaled slowly. He didn't feel lucky. He felt shaken. Ava whispered, "We couldn't afford a new inhaler. I thought he was getting better." Ethan glanced at her torn shoes, the way her fingers twisted nervously in her lap. He'd seen people like her only through tinted glass, blurred, distant. Tonight, she had a name. He sat beside her. "Does he have anyone else?" She shook her head. "Our parents died 2 years ago. I work at a diner after school. He's all I have." Ethan stared at the sterile hallway ahead. For the first time in years, silence felt heavy, not peaceful, but accusing. His phone buzzed. A message from his assistant. "Board meeting at 9. Don't be late." He put it face down. Ava looked at him curiously. "Why did you stop?" "People never stop." He didn't have an answer. Maybe he was tired of being one of those people who never did. Outside, dawn began to break through the rain, faint gold brushing across the glass. A nurse returned with a small smile. "Your brother's stable now. He'll wake up soon." Ava's tears finally fell, but this time they were mixed with relief. "Thank you," she whispered again, over and over. Ethan looked away, swallowing the lump in his throat. He didn't deserve her gratitude. Not yet, because deep inside, he knew there was something about this moment that was going to change everything. Hours passed before Liam finally stirred in his hospital bed. The room was dim, filled with the rhythmic beeping of machines and the faint scent of disinfectant. Ava hadn't moved from her chair all night. Her eyes were swollen, her hand still clutching her brother's small, fragile fingers. Ethan stood near the window, the city's gray dawn casting long shadows over his face. When Liam's eyes fluttered open, Ava gasped, You're okay, pressing her forehead to his hand. The boy's voice was barely a whisper. Did I scare you?" She laughed softly, tears slipping down her cheeks. You always do, troublemaker. Ethan toned, a small smile breaking his otherwise composed face. You're safe now, Liam, he said, voice gentle, almost fatherly. The boy blinked at him. Who's that? Ava glanced at Ethan. Someone who helped us. Ethan stepped forward. Just call me a friend. There was silence for a beat. Then Liam asked, do friends drive cars that cost more than our house? Ethan chuckled softly, a rare, almost forgotten sound. Sometimes they do, he said, slipping his hands into his pockets. Ava looked embarrassed. He doesn't mean. It's all right, Ethan interrupted kindly. Honesty's a good thing. The nurse entered with a clipboard. You'll both need to fill out discharge papers later. But the boy needs rest. Ava nodded. Ethan quietly stepped out to give them privacy, walking down the whole line with hospital posters about empathy and care, words that felt like they mocked him. He remembered his own childhood, sterile, strict, loveless. His parents had wealth, not warmth. They gave him every comfort except compassion. Maybe that's why this girl's pain hit differently. Maybe he saw something in her that reminded him of the boy he used to be before money hardened everything. When he returned, Ava was sitting beside Liam, talking softly. He caught fragments of her words. Promises to do better, to never let him suffer again. He cleared his throat lightly. Do you two have a way home? Ava shook her head. No, our apartment's across town, but I'll figure it out. Ethan paused. I can drop you off. She looked at him skeptically. You don't have to. You've already done more than enough. He shrugged. It's just a ride. They left the hospital together, stepping into the cool morning. The rain had stopped, but puddles still mirrored the tired city lights. His car waited by the curb, sleek and silent. Ava hesitated before getting in, her worn sneakers squeaking against the wet pavement. Inside, silence settled thickly. Liam dozed in the back seat, head resting on Ava's shoulder. Ethan glanced at her through the mirror. You're strong, he said quietly. She gave a tired smile. I don't know if I am. I just don't have a choice. He nodded slowly. Sometimes survival doesn't give you one. For a long time, neither spoke. The city passed by, tall buildings and empty streets, two worlds colliding inside one car. When they reached their neighborhood, Ethan slowed down. The streets were narrow, lined with peeling paint and broken lights. Ava pointed toward a small building with rusted gates. That's us. Ethan parked. The area was quieter than he expected, but the silence here wasn't peace. It was resignation. Ava carried Liam's bag while Ethan lifted the boy gently, careful not to wake him. Inside their apartment, cracked walls and flickering bulbs told their story before she even spoke. Thank you again, she said, voice trembling as she set Liam down on an old couch. You really don't have to do any more. Ethan looked around the room. Sparse furniture, one photo of their parents by the wall, everything clean but worn. Do you have food? She hesitated. Some bread, maybe a can of soup. He exhaled. I'll send someone with groceries later. Just don't argue. Ava blinked, surprised. Why? You don't even know us. He looked at her for a long moment. Maybe I should. She didn't reply, just lowered her eyes, trying not to cry again. As he turned to leave, Liam's small voice came from behind. Will you come back? Ethan stopped at the door. His throat tightened in a way he didn't expect. Yes, he said finally. I think I will. When the door closed, Ava sank to her knees beside her brother. Maybe there are still good people left, she whispered. Outside, Ethan stood by his car, staring up at the gray sky. The city moved on, busy, loud, indifferent. But for once, he didn't feel like part of it. Something inside him had shifted. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning of something far bigger than one rainy night. 3 days passed. The city moved on as if nothing had happened, but Ethan couldn't. He sat in his office, surrounded by glass walls and silent assistants. The skyline he once admired now looked hollow, a reflection of everything he'd built yet somehow lost. His phone buzzed again and again with meeting reminders, investment calls, and charity invitations, but his mind stayed trapped in that rain-soaked street. He found himself staring at a small inhaler on his desk, the one he bought the next morning and sent to Ava's address. A part of him didn't expect her to accept it. People like him didn't just walk into lives like Hayes, not without suspicion. Yet, when the delivery driver returned, there'd been a note inside the box. "Thank you for helping us breathe again. Ava and Liam." He read it more times than he'd admit. Later that evening, as the sun sank behind the skyline, Ethan's car stopped once more outside that narrow street. He didn't know what he planned to say. Maybe nothing at all. But when Ava opened the door, surprise washed over her tired face. "You came back." "I told your brother I would," Ethan said simply. She smiled faintly, stepping aside. "He's better now. Wants to show you his drawings." Inside, Liam sat cross-legged on the floor, sketching superheroes on torn paper. "Mr. Hale, look, I drew you. See, you're saving the city." Ethan laughed softly. "You made me taller." "Heroes are supposed to be tall," Liam said, grinning. Ava watched quietly, something warm stirring in her chest. It had been so long since laughter filled their home. For the first time in years, the air didn't feel heavy. Ethan placed a small box on the table. "Some groceries. Essentials. I hope that's okay." Ava froze. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he interrupted gently. "And maybe you could let me take you both out for dinner tomorrow. My treat." Her brows furrowed. "Dinner? With us?" He nodded. "With friends." The word friends felt foreign on her tongue, yet comforting. She bit her lip, unsure. "All right, but only if it's somewhere simple. We don't fit in fancy places." He smiled. "Then simple it is." The next evening, Ethan took them to a small diner near the harbor, the kind of place where the smell of fries and laughter replaced formality. Liam was ecstatic, talking nonstop about comic books, while Ava sat quietly, still cautious, still unsure why this man, a billionaire, cared. At one point, as Liam ran to get a milkshake refill, she looked at Ethan. "You don't have to do this. We're fine now." Ethan stirred his coffee, eyes distant. "Do you know what fine means in my world? It means empty. I've spent years building things that don't breathe. Money doesn't talk to you. It doesn't thank you. It just grows." Ava's voice softened. "Then why keep it?" He looked up at her, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Because I didn't know what else to do." Silence settled between them, thick but not uncomfortable. There was something grounding about her presence, something real. After dinner, they walked by the pier. The wind tugged at Ava's hair as Liam chased seagulls ahead. The city light shimmered on the water like scattered hope. Ethan said quietly, "When I was your age, I thought kindness was weakness. My father taught me that empathy gets you stepped on." Ava turned to him. "Do you still believe that?" He hesitated. "I'm trying not to." She smiled faintly. "Then you're already stronger than he ever was." Those words hit deeper than she realized. For years, Ethan had lived behind walls of logic and money, yet here was this girl, tearing them down with one sentence. When they returned home, Liam hugged him tightly. "Come back soon, okay?" Ethan crouched, patting his head. "I will. You still owe me that drawing of me flying, remember?" The boy giggled and ran inside. Ava lingered at the doorway. "I don't know what this means for you," she said quietly, "but thank you for seeing us." Ethan gave a small nod. Sometimes it takes losing everything real to see what matters. As he drove away, her words echoed in his mind. Maybe this was his chance, not to buy redemption, but to earn it. Days turned into weeks, and what started as a single act of kindness began to weave itself into something deeper. Ethan found himself stopping by their small apartment almost every evening, sometimes bringing food, sometimes books for Liam, and sometimes nothing at all except quiet company. He didn't understand it, but somehow, sitting in that tiny, worn-out living room felt more peaceful than his entire mansion combined. Ava, at first cautious, had slowly grown to trust him. She noticed how he always left his phone on silent when he visited, how he never talked about his wealth, and how he always listened, really listened, when she spoke. It was strange, having someone like him care without expectation. Liam adored him. Every time Ethan arrived, the boy would run up shouting, "Mr. Hale's here," as if the sound of his name brought light into their dim world. Ethan brought him a new sketchbook one day, saying, "For your superheroes, and maybe one for yourself too." Liam grinned, flipping through the pages. "You think I could be one?" Ethan smiled softly. "You already are." But behind those gentle moments, something darker lingered. Ethan was still fighting battles no one could see. Guilt, loneliness, the weight of choices he made chasing success. His company was under pressure, investors demanding ruthless decisions he no longer had the stomach for. One night, after a tense board meeting where his compassion was mocked as weakness, he walked out and drove straight to Ava's place without thinking. When she opened the door, he looked tired, not physically, but in the soul-deep way people do when they've been running from themselves for too long. "Rough day?" she asked gently. He gave a small laugh. "You could say that." She motioned him inside. "Sit. I made soup. It's not much, but it helps." He smiled faintly, taking the offered bowl. It was warm, simple, real. "Do you ever wonder," he said after a moment, "if kindness is just a way to make ourselves feel less broken?" Ava paused, studying him. "Maybe. But even if it is, does that make it any less real?" He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time, so not just a poor girl fighting to survive, but a strength he couldn't buy or build, a kind of grace born from pain. The next morning, Ethan showed up again, this time, dressed casually, no chauffeur, no shoot. "How about a small trip?" he asked. Liam jumped up instantly. "Where to?" Ethan grinned. "Somewhere with trees and sunshine. You two could use both." They spent the day at a small park on the city's edge. Ava laughed as Liam chased pigeons, while Ethan sat on a bench, watching them with quiet wonder. He hadn't realized how long it had been since he'd heard genuine laughter, not the forced kind at business parties, but the kind that heals something inside you. Later, as the sky turned amber, Ava sat beside him. "You look different," she said softly. He raised an eyebrow. "Older." "No," she smiled. "Lighter." He chuckled. "That's your doing." She looked down at her hands. "No, it's yours. You decided to carry." The wind carried the faint sound of children playing, and for a brief moment, the world felt still, as if time itself was holding its breath for them. But peace is fragile. It trembles before it breaks. Ethan's phone buzzed again, a call from his assistant. He ignored it. Then another, and another. Finally, he sighed and answered. "Yes." The voice on the other end was sharp. "Sir, the board voted to remove you. They say you've lost focus. The press already has a story." Ava watched his face pale, his hand tightening around the phone. "I see," he whispered. "Thank you." He hung up, the color draining from his eyes. "Ethan?" Ava asked carefully. He stayed into the distance. "It's gone. Everything. The company, the name, all of it." Ava reached for his hand instinctively. "You still have yourself." He let out a bitter laugh. "That might be the worst part." "No," she said, her voice steady. "It's the best, because now you can decide who that self really is." He looked at her, eyes wet with something he hadn't felt in years, humility, pain, and something resembling peace. "Why are you always right?" he murmured. Ava smiled faintly. "Because I've already lost everything once. It teaches you what matters." For the first time, Ethan didn't look away. He simply nodded, a quiet surrender to the truth that she'd been teaching him all along, that wealth without warmth was poverty of the soul. The news spread faster than fire in dry grass. By evening, every major outlet had the same headline: "Ethan Hale steps down after board vote." Some called it betrayal, others a downfall, but to Ethan, it just felt quiet. The kind of quiet that follows an explosion. He didn't answer calls, didn't check emails. He sat by his apartment window that night, staring at the skyline he'd once ruled, now stripped of meaning. His reflection in the glass looked like a stranger. When he finally picked up his phone, it wasn't to call his lawyer or his accountant. It was to message Ava. "Can I come by?" Her reply came instantly. You don't have to ask. When he arrived, Liam opened the door first, grinning as always. Mr. Hale, we made pancakes. Ethan managed a weak smile. Then I'm in the right place. Ava was in the kitchen, flipping pancakes on an old pan, the air sweet with sugar and vanilla. Rough day? She asked softly, not turning around. He leaned against the counter. The roughest. You lost your company. He nodded slowly. They said I changed, that I wasn't the same man who built it. She looked up at him, her gaze firm but kind. They're right. You're better. He laughed under his breath, shaking his head. Funny, it doesn't feel that way. Ava slid a plate toward him. That's because you're still measuring yourself with the wrong ruler. He stared at her for a long moment. There was no pity in her eyes, only truth. It disarmed him more than any insult ever could. Liam hopped onto a chair. Mr. Hale, can we still go to the park this weekend? You promised. Ethan smiled faintly. We can go anywhere you want, champ. The boy grinned wide. Then I want to see the ocean. Ethan hesitated. The ocean, the edge of everything. Deal. That weekend, they drove to the coast. The air was salty, the waves roaring like they had something to say. Liam ran ahead with his kite, laughter echoing against the wind. Ava and Ethan walked behind, the sand cool beneath their feet. Do you regret it? She asked quietly. What? Losing everything. He took a deep breath. At first, yes, I built my empire to prove I wasn't my father, that I could be someone powerful. But now, maybe I should have tried to be someone good instead. Ava stopped walking. You don't have to choose. You can still be both. He turned to her, the sea breeze ruffling his hair. You really believe that? She smiled. I have to. Otherwise, what's the point of fighting? He watched her then, sunlight brushing her face, eyes steady as a horizon. For the first time, he realized he didn't want to go back to the world he'd lost. Maybe this simple, imperfect, human connection was what he'd been chasing all along. They stayed by the water until sunset. Liam fell asleep in the sand, his kite tangled in his arms. Ava tucked her brother's hair behind his ear and whispered, He hasn't smiled like this in years. Ethan knelt beside her. You did that. You gave him hope. She shook her head. No, we did. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, time slowed. The crashing waves seemed distant, the sky bled gold and violet, and somewhere in that silence, something unspoken bloomed between them. Fragile, real, terrifyingly pure. Then, as if on cue, Ethan's phone buzzed again. A single text from an unknown number. You may have left the company, but you still have debts, Hale. Some people don't forget. He felt his stomach drop. Ava noticed his expression change. What's wrong? Nothing, he lied, slipping the phone away. But deep down, he knew not all parts of his past were ready to let him go. As they packed up to leave, Ava reached out, touching his arm gently. Whatever it is, you don't have to carry it alone. He forced a smile. I don't deserve that kind of grace. She looked at him, her voice soft but firm. Then own it. That night, as he drove them home under a sky full of stars, Ethan realized something. Forgiveness, whether from others or from yourself, isn't given, it's chosen. And maybe, just maybe, it was time he started choosing it. The following week, Ethan tried to return to normal, but normal didn't exist anymore. The penthouse felt colder, the marble floors louder, the silence heavier. He'd spent years surrounded by luxury, yet now, without Ava and Liam's laughter, every echo felt like a reminder of what truly mattered, and what didn't. He started volunteering quietly at a community center, helping fund medical supplies for children who couldn't afford treatment. It was the first time in decades that his money felt like it actually meant something. But even as he began rebuilding his life, that threatening text haunted him. One evening, as he was locking his office at the center, a figure stepped from the shadows. It was Marcus, a former associate, the kind of man who thrived in greed's shadow. His smirk was sharp as broken glass. You think walking away clears your slate, Hale? Ethan froze. What do you want, Marcus? Money. The board may have kicked you out, but I know what you've hidden. Offshore accounts, deals under fake names. Pay up, or your new charity hero image goes up in flames. Ethan's jaw tightened. Those funds were for projects, not personal gain. Marcus stepped closer. Doesn't matter. The world loves a scandal. You've got 7 to 2 hours. Then he was gone, swallowed by the night. Ethan stood there, heart pounding. He'd tried to change, to do better, but his past was ready to drag him back under. The next morning, he drove straight to Ava's apartment. She opened the door and immediately sensed something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked. He exhaled, his hands trembling slightly. "Someone's trying to ruin everything I've been working for. Someone I used to trust." Ava frowned. "Then fight it. You can't run every time your past knocks." "It's not just about me," he said quietly. "If this goes public, it could affect the center and the people we're helping." "Then tell the truth before he does," she said simply. "Honesty can't be blackmailed." Her words sank deep. For years, Ethan had built his empire on silence, the kind that bought respect but buried truth. Maybe it was time to dig it up. That night, he sat in his apartment with a single lamp on, typing. His confession, a full public statement. Every shady deal he'd known, every compromise he'd made to survive in a world of wolves. He didn't spare himself, didn't sugarcoat. When he finished, he sent it to the press before he could change his mind. The next morning, chaos erupted online. Headlines screamed, "Ethan Hale exposes corporate corruption, admits his own role." The fallout was brutal. Reporters outside his home, critics calling him foolish, investors disowning his name. But beneath the noise, something else stirred. Respect. Strangers began writing to the community center, donating, thanking him for his honesty. "You're teaching us what accountability looks like," one comment read. When Ava saw the news, she rushed to find him. She spotted him at the center, loading boxes of food with volunteers. "You actually did it," she said, breathless. He looked up, exhausted but smiling. "Yeah, and it feels lighter." Ava shook her head, half in disbelief. "You realize what you've done? You destroyed the version of yourself the world worshipped." Ethan smiled faintly. Maybe that version deserved it. They stood there for a long moment, the sound of children laughing in the background, the smell of freshly baked bread from the kitchen nearby. It wasn't a fairy tale moment, but it was real. Later that evening, they sat outside on the center steps. The sunset spilled over the horizon, painting everything gold. "Do you ever think about starting over?" Ava asked softly. Ethan chuckled. "Every day. But maybe starting over isn't about going somewhere new. Maybe it's about becoming someone new." Ava leaned her head on his shoulder, her voice barely above a whisper. "You already have." He looked out at the fading light. For the first time in years, the weight in his chest loosened. Redemption didn't erase the past, but it rewrote the ending. Somewhere inside, Ethan realized that kindness had come full circle, from the girl who once screamed for help to the man who had finally learned what it meant to give it. Weeks turned into months, and life began to find a rhythm again, not perfect, but peaceful. The community center flourished under Ethan's guidance. Children who once had nothing now had books, meals, and a place to belong. Ava volunteered there after her diner shifts, and Liam became everyone's favorite helper, proudly calling Ethan his big brother in a suit. Ethan, once the face of ruthless ambition, had become something entirely different, the kind of man whose presence brought calm rather than fear. And though the tabloids eventually moved on, the people who mattered most never did. They stayed. They saw him. But redemption isn't without its ghosts. One evening, Ethan found a letter slipped under the center's door. No signature, just a single line written in rushed, uneven handwriting. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It just lets you walk through it without chains. He didn't know who sent it, maybe Marcus, maybe someone from the board, but it didn't matter. The words hit home. He folded the letter carefully and kept it in his wallet. As autumn rolled in, the city turned golden. The three of them, Ethan, Ava, and Liam, spent Sundays in the park, watching the leaves fall like soft confessions. Ethan often caught himself staring at them, at the simplicity of their joy, and wondering how something so ordinary could feel like salvation. One evening, Ava stayed behind at the center to help close. The lights flickered as she organized the supply shelves. Ethan walked in quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said. She smiled. "You're getting good at this whole kindness thing." He chuckled, handing her the cup. "You taught me well." They sat together in the quiet hall, the air filled with a soft hum of distant laughter from volunteers. Ava looked down at her cup. "You know, when I first met you, I hated you." Ethan raised an eyebrow, amused. "Really? You were this untouchable man in a fancy car. I thought you'd never understand what it's like to lose everything." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I didn't back then, but I do now." Ava's gaze softened. "I think you've always understood. You just forgot how to feel it." Her words lingered between them, delicate but true. Ethan looked at her, truly seeing her, not just a girl who once screamed for help, but the woman who had unknowingly rebuilt him piece by piece. "Do you ever miss them?" he asked quietly. "My parents," she whispered. "Every day. But sometimes I think they sent you to us." He swallowed hard, emotion catching in his throat. "I should have found you sooner." She smiled sadly. Maybe this was the only time we were both ready. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft, steady, cleansing. It reminded them both of that night months ago, when everything began. Ava stood, walking to the doorway. "You know what's funny?" she said. "That night, I thought you were just another rich man who'd drive away. I never imagined you'd stay long enough to change our story." Ethan joined her, standing close enough to feel her warmth. "You changed mine first." They stood in silence, watching the rain dance under the dim streetlights. Ava turned to him, her voice quiet. "So what now? You rebuilt everything, except maybe one thing." He met her eyes. "What's that?" "Your heart," she said simply. "It's time you let someone take care of it, too." He didn't respond, just reached out, gently brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. "Maybe," he whispered, "I already have." At that, she smiled, not the uncertain, guarded kind, but the kind that feels like sunrise after a long storm. Behind them, the children's laughter echoed faintly through the hall, mixing with the rhythm of rain, a quiet symphony of second chances. Ethan realized then that redemption wasn't something you earned once. It was something you practiced every day. Through love, through honesty, through choosing to stay. He turned to Ava, his voice barely audible. "You saved me." She shook her head. "No, you saved yourself the moment you decided to care." And in that moment, under flickering light and falling rain, Ethan smiled, not as a billionaire or a savior, but as a man who had finally come home to his own heart. Winter came softly that year, quieter than before, gentler somehow. The city lights shimmered through thin fog, and for once, Ethan didn't feel trapped behind glass. He still drove the same streets where Ava had first screamed for help, but now every turn carried memory instead of guilt. The community center was alive that December. Children's laughter spilled through every hallway, holiday lights tangled above the entrance, and the scent of cinnamon and cocoa filled the air. Liam ran around with a Santa hat too big for his head, shouting, "Mr. Hale, we need more marshmallows." Ethan laughed, holding up a bag. "Already ahead of you, partner." Ava walked in carrying a tray of cookies, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She paused, watching him laugh with the kids, her eyes soft with a kind of affection that didn't need to be spoken. He caught her gaze and smiled. "You approve." She tilted her head. "Of the marshmallows, or you?" "Both, hopefully." She chuckled. "You're getting there." They moved through the night like two souls who'd already lived 1,000 stories together, not bound by romance alone, but by shared redemption. Every decoration hung, every smile exchange was a quiet act of healing. Later, when the children went home and the laughter faded into night, Ethan stood outside the center with Ava, the glow of streetlights painting them in gold. Snowflakes drifted lazily between them. He broke the silence first. "Do you ever think about how strange it is, how everything can change from one moment?" Ava looked up at him. "You mean the night I screamed at a billionaire?" He laughed softly. "Yeah, That one. She smiled. I think about it all the time. I think about how losing everything brought me the one thing I never had, someone who actually stayed. He turned toward her, the snow landing on his shoulders like quiet blessings. I didn't stay out of guilt anymore, Ava. I stayed because I found home. She blinked back tears, whispering, "And what is home to you, Ethan?" He thought for a moment. It's when someone remembers a version of you that's still good, even when you don't. Her eyes glistened. Then I guess we both found it. They stood there as the snow fell heavier, the city humming softly around them, alive, forgiving. In the distance, church bells chimed midnight. Ava stepped closer, her hand slipping into his. "Do you ever regret it, losing your empire?" He squeezed her fingers gently. "No, I only regret not losing it sooner." She smiled. "You really have changed." He nodded slowly. "Because you screamed." She laughed through her tears. "I guess that was the loudest prayer I ever made." They fell silent again, just watching the snow. For a long moment, there was no pain, no past, only the quiet truth of two people who had found redemption through each other's broken pieces. Liam's sleepy voice came from behind the door. "Ava? Ethan? Come inside. It's cold." They looked back, smiling. "Coming, champ," Ethan called. As they stepped inside, the warmth of the center wrapped around them. The walls were lined with drawings, kids, families, hearts, and above them all, one picture stood out. It was Liam's drawing of Ethan, the one from months ago, but this time he wasn't wearing a suit. He was holding hands with a little boy and a girl, under the words written in shaky handwriting. "Real heroes don't save cities. They save hearts." Ethan stopped, staring at it, emotion flooding his chest. Ava placed her hand on his shoulder, whispering. He drew what he saw. He swallowed hard, voice breaking. "Then I hope I never stop deserving it." She looked up at him, smiling softly. "You already do." As the lights dimmed and the night deepened, Ethan glanced one last time at the snow outside, the same kind that once soaked his suit, the same kind that had witnessed his first act of humanity. Only now, it didn't feel cold anymore. It felt like grace.